what is the best investment you ever made in your life? Was it a mutual fund, a house, a car, perhaps? I'm here to tell you about what the best investment I ever made in my life was. But before I do, let's reconsider the term investment and what it means. Let's think of it as not only what an investment can get you, but what an investment can also save you from. My best investment is zero emissions because it literally allowed me to sleep better at night. It really changed my life, and it let me see my community in a completely different way. My zero emissions investment literally protected my family and I. Also, it financially benefited me, and it also inspired me to create a plan to save billions of dollars in my Fargo community and have perfect air. But before I go and talk about investments, I want to show you some of the changes in my life that I've had to face because of this journey. I now have to resist becoming a mad scientist. And I do that because anytime I see a new person, I walk up to them and say, "Hi, my name is John. How much pollution is in your brains?" Well, I really shouldn't do that. So I'm really trying to resist that statement when I first meet people. And I'm actually wondering how much pollution is in my brains too. Very good question. I still don't know that answer. That's what worries me. The other way it really changed my life was that I am no longer really a Christian. I've almost become a pagan sun worshiper. When you have solar panels on your house, you really know what the sun is doing because, hey, you're getting money for it every second of the day. So I can literally look at the sky and tell you how much energy I'm getting that day or at that time, which is great that I've reconnected with the sky because we've kind of lost that in our civilization. But now I'm going to show you the biggest power plant in Fargo for 4 years' time. Are you ready to see this humongous solar power plant? There it is. That was my house. Isn't that pathetic? My house was the largest solar production in Fargo for 4 years. We were the big ones with our 30 solar panels. What's so great about our house is we've actually integrated the solar with the house and then the house with the electric vehicle. So they're all integrated together. And we've even gone beyond that. The lawnmower is electric, our barbecue's electric, my daughter's toys are electric, our electronics are electric. So those are all powered by the sun too. It's been a great journey so far, and we've had tremendous success. Every year we have generated more energy than we used before we got our electric vehicle. And I have to say that we are 70% out of fossil fuels right now, which is pretty good for North Dakota if you think about it. We are also 100% out of cigarettes. We don't smoke cigarettes. And you might ask, why did I say that? Well, if you think about it, air pollution is actually really bad for us. If you take a look at the ingredients of gasoline, you'll see that there's 15 different ingredients, and a lot of them are shared with cigarettes, especially benzene and toluene. Benzene and toluene are highly toxic. Benzene is a carcinogen. The largest source in our environment comes from vehicle exhaust emissions. Also, when you burn gas, you get other bad compounds, and then if you burn coal and live by a power plant, you get exposed to other bad compounds. But the thing that I want you to take home from this slide is literally, and MIT did a study that showed 105,000 people die every year from air pollution in this country. Think about that. That's 53,000 Americans die from vehicle exhaust emissions every year, and 52,000 Americans every year die from power plant emissions. That's 300 people a day, which is incredible if you think about it. It's kind of upsetting because, in a sense, we are kind of doing this ritual human sacrifice like ancient civilizations did. They did it for their culture. We're doing it so we can drive our vehicle and turn the light switch on. I think we have to really consider that we should really stop doing this because we don't want to be viewed as a culture or society that engages in ritual human sacrifice. And I'm a biochemist. I know what these compounds do. I've worked with these compounds in a university setting. They're very dangerous, and yet we breathe them in and we get polluted by them. So you have to consider also not only redefining the term investment, but redefining what it means. What does air pollution mean? Air pollution is extremely dynamic. It's at a special place and a special time, it can be quite different during the day. So it's always changing, always moving with the cars. And so we really have to think about what does that mean for Fargo and the people in Fargo. Well, there's another study that came out from the Center for Disease Control, and they really showed something even more astonishing than the MIT study, in my opinion, because now they showed that air pollution is literally targeting our kids. And they use the term high-density traffic, and that's how we have to think about air pollution now in our cities, as high-density traffic. And the closer you are to it, and if you're a child, you're more susceptible to its impact. I don't think any of us would like to watch Sesame Street and see Oscar the Grouch smoking cigarettes with a bunch of kids. And yet that pretty much is what's happening when we allow our kids to be beside vehicles that produce toxic compounds. They breathe it in just like smoking. So that was really chilling, because now not only are we a society that practices ritual human sacrifice, we're doing it on our children as well, which is something I think we should put a stop to. But now comes the most scariest slide I've ever presented. So I'm sorry if I give you nightmares, but I have to do this. I just have to. Ta-da, this is my scary slide. You might wonder why it's so scary, but in that sense, all of us have these heavy metal pollution nanoparticles in our brain. There's billions of them probably in your brain and my brain. If you live in urban areas like I have done all my life, if I work beside a coal plant at NDSU, I'm getting nanoparticles that way too. In fact, they're so abundant, they outnumber the normal brain waste particles 100 to 1. Imagine that you have 100 garbage bags coming into your house every time you produce your own garbage bag. Your house would get pretty messy after a while. You wouldn't be able to function in it, and yet that's what we're doing to our brain cells. We're letting in 100 times more waste particles from the outside than we're producing internally in our brain cells. I should say these nanoparticles, which you can see on the bottom left, those are literal nanoparticles in a dead person's brain. They tend to be spherical because they're burnt by combustion into a sphere. They're also made up of heavy metals such as nickel and iron, so they're definitely not part of your normal brain operation. Your brain isn't supposed to have those kind of metals in there. And they tend to be a lot bigger than the normal brain waste particles that you see at the center of the slide there, which tend to be irregular in shape and a lot smaller and a lot less numerous. As a control, you can see a diesel vehicle emitting nanoparticles directly from its exhaust. So there's no doubt that it's coming out of diesel cars, it's coming out of gas cars, it's coming out of coal power plants. And so you have to think about this in terms of the NFL. If you think about the NFL story, recently a study came out that showed 99% of dead NFL players' brains had major brain damage, 90% of dead college football players' brains had major brain damage, and even 20% of high school players' brains had major brain damage. So you have to kind of conclude that playing football and your brain's health is not a good thing necessarily. In fact, it has a lot of NFL players scared right now, as they should be. We're in the same boat as them because, in a sense, we all get these doses of an exposure to these toxic nanoparticles in our brain, and they're not doing any good there. I should also say that my wife and I had a perfect marriage until we got our electric vehicle. Now we kind of have discussions on who gets to use it, with the loser stuck with the gas vehicle. But the deciding factor for us is essentially who's driving our 6-year-old daughter, Mara, who's in the audience today. Whoever drives her gets to use the electric vehicle because we don't want her brain to be exposed to the nanoparticles from our gas vehicle. So we're highly selective, and that solved our arguments. The only one positive thing I can say about this study, which is just very scary and still gives me nightmares about how much I have in my brain and how much my kid's going to get, is that if you think about it, anytime you make a mental error, and if I make a mental error, I can now blame nanoparticles in my brain for it. So that's the only good thing I could think of. Oh, damn you, nanoparticles, I made a mistake. Oh, well. So you have to wonder what these nanoparticles are doing in our heads. And this nanoparticle study came out literally just, I would say late last year. Less than 6 months later, an epidemiological study came out that showed, again, high-density traffic, you get more risk of Alzheimer's. And the closer you get to the high-density traffic in terms of if you live or if you work there, the more nanoparticles you're exposed to, the more chance you'll get Alzheimer's. So there's definitely a correlation. Why should we care about Alzheimer's? Well, right now, Alzheimer's consumes 20% of Medicare dollars. And in the next few years, that number is going to rise to 33%. In a sense, it's likely going to bankrupt Medicare. It's the only major disease that's getting worse. Why should we care about it in North Dakota? Well, 14,000 people in North Dakota have Alzheimer's, and that number is expected to dramatically rise to 16,000 in less than a decade. So all these things that cause pollution in our environment are essentially, if you look at the state of North Dakota, adds up to $1 billion a year of medical expenses that we're paying associated with this pollution. So now we're going to kind of switch to an economic argument. I've told you all this scary science stuff saying this is really bad for us. But not only is it bad as a health investment, it's actually bad as an economic investment. In fact, I would say air pollution is extremely expensive. One of the things I've been working on in Fargo is a Fargo Cass County Comprehensive Energy Study with our population of 171,000, and we have about 141,000 vehicles. We found in this study that depending on the price of gas, we can really burn like $500 million a year if it's at $3 a gallon. That's huge. In fact, that alone doubles the amount we spend on electricity and natural gas and coal combined, roughly speaking, if gas turns to $3 a gallon. Even if it's at $2 a gallon, it's still expensive with $334 million a year. So you can see that our community spends, or I call it bleeds, $607 million a year if gas is cheap, but that number quickly rises to $774 million if gas becomes more expensive. I'd like to know what Bismarck spends on its energy every year. I calculated it to be $14 billion in the next 30 years. So I challenge somebody in the audience to find that out. Find out what Bismarck uses. If you're not from Bismarck, find out what your community spends on energy. You might be surprised how much it is. In a sense, Fargo, places like Grand Forks, we have a choice in the next 30 years. And in my case, Fargo Cass County has an energy choice. We can either do zero emissions, have no air pollution, and spend $15 billion on energy, or we can do what we're doing now, which is basically nothing, get more cars, which have more gas vehicles, leads to more air pollution, and we will spend $23 billion. That's amazing if you think about it. Going and ending up with no air pollution actually saves you money over a 30-year time period, and that amount is $1,600 per year per person. So it's quite dramatic. The one thing I would say is we're kind of addicted to energy in Fargo. It's not like food where we trade food with other communities and we have a balance of trade there. With energy, we don't generate any of our own energy, and we have no clean, real transportation, hardly at all. So in a sense, we're almost like drug addicts, and I want to get us off of this addiction and get us into generating our own clean energy and clean transportation so we become a much healthier community. So I'm sorry, up to this point in time, I have given you a really depressing talk. I've told you that, boy, our society sucks. We're into human ritual sacrifice. We're killing our kids. There's nanoparticles in your brain, and we're all going to get Alzheimer's, maybe. I just, sorry about that. I've never given a lecture this depressing before. But there are solutions to the problem. Limitless local and solar energy and wind energy, and also electric vehicles. And my house is a good example. Every year we produce more energy than we use. And just to back that up, you can see that I will guarantee that solar works well in Fargo because I have 5 years of data and we always get about 9,500 kilowatt hours a year. So it's very consistent. That makes sense because we grow a lot of crops in North Dakota. The sun year to year has to be consistent or else we would have really bad crops one year, really good crops the next year if the sun was going back and forth. So the sun is steady. The sun is stable. If you look at what fracking does, and they lose half their production in the first 6 months, and they get most of their oil in the first 3 years. So they drop like a rock. I once did a prediction where I calculated that the state of North Dakota from 2014 lost $12 billion in investment with fracking. As a consequence, I know you guys are all aware that the state government hasn't been doing so well. My institution, NDSU, got cut 17%, and guess who lost his job a couple months ago? Me. So I kind of predicted my own doom by saying that we shouldn't we shouldn't really use oil as a revenue base. It's too unpredictable, it's too volatile, and we face the consequences. Who would go to Las Vegas and make a bet and then wait 3 years to find out if that bet works or not? Well, we had to wait 3 years to find out that was a really bad bet for us. So I know solar energy works well. It's a great solution. If you think about it, I haven't even talked about jobs. If we start to create our own solar panels and wind turbines in Fargo-Cass County, we will get 2,000 high-quality jobs every year for the 30-year plan. And that would just be a huge boost in jobs in our local community. Plus, the other thing that people like is money. Well, if you go to zero emissions and start driving electric vehicles, you will save money. In fact, most of the $8 billion we would save in 30 years' time would literally come from driving EVs, $6.5 billion. Why are EVs so good? They only use 1/3 the energy to travel the same distance as a gas vehicle, and you simply can't beat that. So this is my second last slide, and I have to ask you guys a question. What matters to you? What matters to me is my family, the mountains of Canada, and my community. They're important to me. And in a sense, going to zero emissions is the best investment I've ever made in my life because I'm protecting my family. I'm protecting what matters to me in the mountains. I'm protecting my community. If you guys have families, if they matter to you, you'll want to start to go towards zero emissions. If you have a special place in North Dakota, like Western North Dakota, you will want to do that too, which will ultimately save it. So it all depends on what matters to us. There is a limitless revolution going on right now, and I'm part of that limitless revolution. Right now, Volvo in 2019 is only going to produce cars that are no longer gas vehicles by themselves. They're making a huge change. A country like Holland, all its public transportation is heading towards 100% clean energy. That's amazing. 10 countries, including France and England, want to get rid of gas vehicles in the next 20 years, or phase them completely out. That's amazing too. So I want you to join this limitless revolution because I don't want to be alone in North Dakota. Thank you so much.